Hey guys, welcome back to Heart Breathings. Today we are going to discuss 5 crucial elements of a good novel. To me, these are the things that if you can focus on nailing these, it's going to keep readers reading late into the night. So if you're interested in hearing what they are, just keep watching. So the first element is the hook. So this is really exactly what it sounds like. Something that hooks your reader in and makes them want to keep reading. It can be the very first sentence of your book, the first paragraph, it could be that first page, or even that first chapter. But it needs to be something that happens really fast at the beginning of your book, something that happens quickly, that goes ahead and lets your reader know that there's going to be some really interesting things happening in this book. Now, we have so many choices right now of where we can spend our time. And I do feel like with the way social media is and everything is so fast paced and the way Netflix just drops an entire series at once, that in general, the public's attention span is getting less and less, and the choices are more than ever. And I don't say that to scare you, but at the same time, I do think it's more important than ever to make sure that you really nail those first few sentences, or at least that first page of your book, so that people get a sense of what's going to happen in this book. What type of genre is this? What type of characters are they? And what type of conflict is yet to come? Now, obviously, in the first page, you might not be into the deep conflict yet. We're not talking about the inciting incident, which is going to come later in the book. We're just talking about that little hook, that little thing that makes your reader go, okay, I'm in this, I care. And there are lots of different ways that you can do that. So first of all, it can be a sentence or a paragraph that starts right in the middle of the action. So you throw the reader into already there's movement on the page. Your character's running from someone, there's some kind of tension, there's a murder happening, but some kind of action that's going on in that first page. So that's one way to get people's attention and say, whoa, this is really interesting. And you just hook them right from the start. It could just be a single line that is written in such a way that it's surprising or interesting or lets you know something is off about this world, or something is going on with these characters, or something that makes you care about these characters in a really unique way. It could be a reference to a dire situation or something coming up. It could be foreshadowing. It could be an atmospheric opening that describes the scene and the setting in such a way that the reader knows, okay, there's a mystery here, or there's something really interesting about this world that I really want to get into. But if you can make your reader care about your story world or your character in some way right from the beginning, that's how you hook them in. I think some of the best hooks are the ones where your reader is already questioning this world, like, ooh, what's going to happen here? And if you can have them questioning what's going to happen, I can't wait to see, and already building that tension on the first page, then you've got them hooked. And that is how you start off with a bang. And I love that. And it doesn't have to be some big, massive action. It really can be a subtle first sentence that just brings up a slight question about what's really going on in this world. This is interesting, that will keep them reading. That is a great way to get started. Of course, that's not the whole job. So we've got more elements here besides just the hook. So the second element that is crucial in writing a great novel is writing characters that we care about. Obviously, this goes for the main character. We don't even have to love them. We just have to sympathize or empathize with them in some way, that we have to relate to them, or we have to understand their motivation or why they are the way they are. And then we have to throw them into situations where we are literally invested in what's going to happen to this character because we care about their story. And like I said, this goes for the main character more than ever, that you really want to get invested. You want to make sure that your reader cares about that character enough to continue on with their story and to care if they fail, or, we'll talk about some of those stakes and things like that in a minute. But also your villain or your antagonist. I find that some of my favorite books are the ones with really well thought out antagonists. And when they have their own story and they think they are the hero of this world and they're doing the right thing, or they really believe, or they're particularly interesting or broken in some way, then you really start to have this well-rounded group of characters that you just readers have to know what happens next because I care. And because there are all these bad things happening, which we'll talk about in a second, then I need to know what happens to this character because they're like me in some way, or because I relate to them in some way, or because I am invested in their story. So having characters that we care about is a crucial part of writing a great novel. Now, writing great characters often means coming up with a backstory that really makes sense or is relatable. It's making sure that your character has enough depth, that they have a wound or a ghost in their past that makes them the way they are. They're guarded in some way, or they believe something about the world that isn't necessarily true. And really getting into that character arc, instead of just making them a flat, everyday kind of character, making them someone who has been through something or is protecting themselves in some way. That can be really relatable. It's also really important for you as a writer, if you're going to write great characters, to understand their goal, their motivation, and their conflict. And we're going to talk about this more throughout the video. And I asked on Instagram yesterday, what are some video topics you guys would like to see? And goal, motivation, and conflict came up quite a bit. So we're going to talk even more about this in some future videos. But understanding what your character wants and why it's so important to them, and understanding really not just their external want, but what's really going on in their heart, their internal struggle and their internal character arc, and how that ties into the plot. One of my favorite books about character arcs is K.M. Weiland's Writing Character Arcs, I think it's called, or Character Arcs. Now I can't remember the name of the book, but I will link it down below. It is so good because she does probably the best I've ever heard of anyone really going through how that internal part of your character's arc ties in with the plot and the action of the story. And I think it's really brilliant. Of course, another great book on goal, motivation, and conflict is the book by that same name by Deborah Dixon. So I will link both of those resources for you down below because I think they're amazing. But we will have some more videos on this in the future since so many of you were interested in it. It's also important when we talk about writing great characters to also touch on the fact that your characters need to be acting in alignment with who we've set them up to be. So that means, if you have a character who's afraid of the dark and they're going into a cave, just bravely forging in, that isn't really going to be in alignment with who we've set them up to be. There's going to be that tension and that fear of walking into that cave because we know they're afraid of the dark. And why are they afraid of the dark? This goes into that motivation part of it, and that inner character, and that wound is maybe they had a situation in their past, and this is where the backstory comes in that makes them afraid of the dark. That's just a super simple example, but that kind of stuff, the more we can weave that into our novel, that, hey, this is how my character is because of something that happened in their past, and now every time they confront something similar in this novel, they're going to have to grow a little bit and change and face their fears. And people can relate to that. It makes your character very relatable. But you need to make sure that you keep track of who you've created this character to be so that they're acting in alignment. Also, if they're like extremely intelligent and then they're constantly doing things that are just really stupid, that's not going to make a lot of sense. Or if they're like really guarded emotionally and then they're like blabbing their feelings out at a restaurant to everybody in the room, that's not really in alignment with who they are. So making sure that your characters act to what people call their max capacity, act in alignment with who they really are, that is important. And that goes to understanding your character's backstory and who they are and what they struggle with on the inside. And we'll talk more about this in future videos. Number 3, and this also plays into writing great characters, but also writing a great plot, is conflict. If there's no conflict on the page, you basically don't have a novel. There's no story to tell because there's nothing standing in your way. It would just be like your heroine wants this and now she has it because there's no conflict going on there. That's not really much of a story. So conflict is a crucial element to writing a great book. And what we talk about when we talk about conflict is basically that exact thing. What is standing in your character's way? What's the thing that adds tension to the story? What are the obstacles that your character is going to have to overcome? And there should be multiple layers of conflict. There might be a big conflict that has to do with everybody. Then your character has their own personal conflict. And this can be conflict in their personal relationships, conflict with the villain, conflict with the world and society and what's going on in our society or what's happening in the world, conflict within themselves about something they've done in the past or how they've been acting, conflict with not being able to fully fully embrace who they know they want to be. There's all kinds of level of conflict that we can add into a story. And honestly, the more we can layer that conflict into every single scene that we write in the book, the more your readers are going to be turning those pages so fast that they won't want to put it down and go to sleep at night. What type of conflict shows up in your book is also often tied to what genre it is. So in a mystery, you've got an investigator trying to find out the truth. So the conflict is often going to be not only the murderer on the loose or whatever type of danger is going on, but also what are the obstacles standing in the way to them finding the truth? Witnesses that won't talk to them, somebody who told a lie, some kind of danger that's going on. And then it could be another layer of conflict is that they have their own fears that they're having to face every single time they go out. So if you just want a masterclass in that, watch Silence of the Lambs. It's so good in terms of that layers of conflict that you see in that particular movie, as well as the novel, of course. In a romance, the conflict is often, it can be external. People don't want these two people to get together. Somebody's standing in the way. You've got the ex-wife, you got all these other things, but there's also that internal conflict of, I don't know that I can open my heart up to you because I've been hurt before, or any of those kind of conflicts. So you might have the external conflicts of why they can't be together or what keeps standing in their way of getting together. Oh, you own separate businesses. You come from separate houses who are warring together. There's all kinds of external conflict that you might find in a romance, but there's also got to be that internal conflict that gets resolved, and that character has to grow into who they needed to be this whole time in order to find love. So that conflict is what creates the tension in your story. And that's what makes readers need to know, not just want to know, but if you can get that conflict intention ratcheted up so high that they need to know what's going to happen. Because like I said, it's all mixed together. They care so much about these characters that they have to know, and they cannot stand to see them in this conflict and hurting in this way. And oh my gosh, now he's having to face his worst fear, or he's going to have to change in order to become who he needs to be. That level of conflict can lift your novel up to the next level and really get your readers invested for the long haul. Of course, another element that provides tension in your novel is element number 4, and that's the stakes. So if you want to have a really great book, it's important that the reader understands what are the stakes here. The stakes are basically, what are the consequences if my character fails? If the heroine or hero of this story does not achieve their goal, what they're trying to reach, what they're trying to do, what happens in the world? And again, this is closely going to be tied to whatever genre you're writing. Like if it's some kind of global adventure type story, if your hero or heroine falls, maybe the entire world is destroyed because of some kind of global war or alien invasion or whatever. So you could have huge stakes where you have the whole world is at stake, or it could be a quieter book where the stakes are just that if your character doesn't embrace and grow into who she wants to be and face these demons of her past, then she's going to be stuck here for the rest of her life. And even though that's a quieter part of stakes, is something that so many of us can relate to. And if you've done your job in writing a character that we care about, those stakes are going to feel really high. So what happens if your character fails? That's the stakes. So this is where GMC comes back in, because ultimately your reader needs to be really clear about what your protagonist wants, what their goal is. What happens if they don't achieve it? That's their motivation. What motivates your character is what is going to happen, like the avoidance of what happens if they fail. And then the conflict is what's standing in their way, what's keeping them from, resolving the story. So that's where the GMC comes in. And the motivation is what is often very closely tied to the stakes of your novel. Your protagonist should be highly motivated to avoid the consequences of failure. At some point, your character needs to have that realization that, like, if I cannot become the person I'm meant to be, or I cannot defeat this bad guy, or I can't figure out who this killer is, then this is what's going to happen. And that's what motivates every single action they take on the page, because they know the consequences of their own failure. And like I said, that can be some huge external thing. It can be multiple levels where you've got external, internal, you've got a large external, a smaller external, but ultimately you as the reader understand, because you care about this character and you've been hooked into this story, that if they fail, it's complete disaster in one way or another. And if we care about them, those stakes getting higher and higher, it's kind of like, what's the worst possible thing that could happen to this character? And then you threaten that as a writer. You threaten that this is possibly what's going to happen to them. And that motivates all their action, all of their on screen, so to speak, their on the page action. Then that is going to really make your reader care about what you're saying. And they're going to care about the fifth element of this particular crucial part of bringing together your novel, which is the resolution. In order for your reader to feel really satisfied and to leave with feeling that this book was really good and that they feel that relief at the end of it, you've got to have a resolution to the main conflict of the story. So this is also going to be heavily tied again to your genre. So understanding your genre is extremely important. We talk about this a lot in Publish and Thrive, but if you're writing a romance, then it usually means now the characters are together, they've declared their love, and we know they're going to live happily ever after. Or if it's a mystery of some kind, the truth is revealed, the bad guy goes to prison or is dead, the murderer, justice is done in some way. If it's a paranormal type of investigation, then it's been solved and the ghosts have been let off into, going into heaven. There's some kind of resolution to the story. With a dynamic series, which is the type of series where it builds, each book builds on the next, and you have to read each book in order because it's one big continuing story, of course, you're not going to resolve the entire series in one book. So this is a little bit different. And I wanted to mention this because this is the type of stories that I write. And I know many of you as indie authors are also writing the same kind of series where one book builds upon the next rather than you get a full resolution in each book. Now, some people love to say that if you have a cliffhanger ending, that you're leaving your story unresolved, but this isn't actually true. And I think this is important to understand. And I would love to do deeper videos on this topic because this is very much what I do. You're not actually, if you're doing it right, you're not actually leaving this particular story unresolved. And I write this with my Shadow Demon Saga, and almost every single book that I've ever written has what a lot of people will lovingly call, my fans have lovingly renamed, Sarra hangers instead of cliffhangers. And it leaves you on that sort of feeling of there's something coming next. But I do actually always resolve the main conflict of this particular story. And so the cliffhanger is not so much a cliffhanger, it's another hook. It's a second hook. So the way I like to structure my dynamic series is to have that hook at the beginning. You draw them into the action, the characters, that first, paragraph of the book. And then you have the stakes and conflict and the novel happens. And then I resolve the main conflict, the main mystery conflict question of this particular book, but it's only a piece of the whole battle. And so you feel that resolution these characters are okay for now. It's all going to be okay. And then I throw in another hook, another thing that says, maybe things aren't as good as you thought, or here's the next step in the villain's plan. And it works as kind of like a twist ending, right? And you now have to buy and read the next book to continue on with that hook. But that resolution is so important. And overall, I really feel like this is why the Shadow Demon Saga has been as popular as it has, with over 500,000 books sold. And now I'm on book 12 and feeling the pressure of ending a series, which is another video I would like to make in the future about how to end a long series. But I think that has been a big part of it, is these 5 crucial elements. And then in addition, adding that extra hook at the end that makes them want to read the next book. So it's all about that hook at the beginning that draws them in, really making sure that I'm giving them characters they care about, and then ramping up that conflict, giving them and making very clear what the stakes are, what are the consequences of failure, and then finally giving some kind of resolution to every single story along the way with another hook that lets them know there's more to come in this battle. And, I feel like that's kind of the pressure of writing book 12, is I have to make sure this resolution is not just big enough for this one book, but this has to be the resolution that makes the entire series worth it. And I'm excited to get to that moment, let me tell you. But for me, these are the 5 must-haves. I think that you can make mistakes, you can not follow exactly every little plot point and every little thing. You can be learning and still growing as a writer, but if you can really nail those 5 elements, then you are going to have a hit on your hands and readers are going to be coming back for more. Now, as I said at the beginning, each of these elements have sub-elements and so many examples and so many things that we could talk about. So if you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, please make sure that you not only like it, but that you subscribe to my channel and pop a comment down below and let me know, yes, Sarah, I want to see separate videos, like an entire series, so we could have a whole video on a hook and what it means and all the examples that we have, a separate video on characters, or even a series on writing great characters I feel like could be helpful. Let me know what you want to see in the future, and if you want me to expand on these topics and show you examples, I would absolutely love to. Now, next week, we are finally going to get into my Q1 review and Q2 plan for my Kanban board, and we're starting Camp NaNoWriMo. So if you are joining camp, make sure that you visit my blog post down below that I will link for you and grab your free Camp NaNo workbook. And I will see you guys this weekend for Double Down Day in our writing community. All those links are down below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure that you give it a like, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.